meeting to order on September 25th, 2024. For the Ordinance Committee, present we have Councilor Meg McGrath-Smith, Councilor Jenny Rivera, Councilor Linda Vacan, and Councilor David Bartley. In council chambers, we also have Councilor Carmen Ocasio. Entertain a motion to take up item one. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Item one is the minutes of September 11th, 2024 meeting.
Motion to receive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take number 2 off the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, item 2 was filed by Councilor Jordan. This is the City of Holyoke Development Personnel Policy for the handling of administrative leave and codifying the rules into ordinance as recommended by the Personnel Department, including but not limited to when employees should or should not be placed on paid leave or unpaid leave. The current process appears lacking objective standards. Taxpayers should also be protected to ensure people who should not be out on paid administrative leave are placed on unpaid administrative leave. We actually have the legal language. We also have Attorney Bissonette and Attorney Manteleschi with us. I believe it was Attorney Manteleschi that's particularly working on this particular legal order. So if there's any questions, Councilor Jordan is not here with us, but the only thing we were waiting now, I believe, was for the legal language for us to see it. And then I think there's a couple questions possibly around the CAFO replacement thing. But let me allow Jane to speak on that a little more, to expand, and then I'll entertain Councilor.
Thank you. So, excuse me. I worked with Kelly Curran from our personnel department and Councilor Jordan on Monday. We had a discussion regarding what his thoughts were with respect to this particular order, with respect to the policy to put someone on leave and whether or not that's with compensation and benefits. This was in relation to a legal opinion that I had issued with respect to what happens when you have a conflict between a collective bargaining agreement and General Laws, Chapter 268A, Section 25. So the statute that I just mentioned, Chapter 268A, Section 25, specifically provides that when a employee or official of a municipality, including anybody on a school board, any appointments to boards or commissions, when they are under an indictment, the appointing authority, whoever that is, can suspend. It's a may suspend, not a shall, but a may suspend that person. And if they do so, then that suspension shall be without compensation. And this does not include the timing that they are under investigation for a crime that is indictable, but just rather when they've been charged with an indictable crime, which is one that you get from the grand jury. And it would allow, that statute allows for, if that person ends up being found not guilty of the charge, to essentially get any funds that they would be due to them for benefits or compensation be paid back to them from the time that they got suspended without pay. So we had that discussion. I asked Councilor Jordan whether or not he thought he wanted to have I see that I spelled indicted wrong here. But if they wanted to have kind of a blanket policy as to all, and he said yes. So I wanted to make sure that the language included all departments within the city. And then I had to add that language just in the case that there is conflict with the collective bargaining agreement terms, and they're not preempted by a statute which says essentially that certain statutes are the law of the land, as we would say in the legal community, as opposed to the collective bargaining agreement terms. So that's why I put that language there in the end. But I know that there had been a desire for further discussion on this. And so Councilor Jordan just asked that we provide this form and for the committee to discuss, and then for you guys to ask questions or make amendments as you see fit.
Thank you. Councilor Meg McGrath-Smith.
Thank you so much. I have a few questions, and you, of course, I think even in how you stressed the word may, I have a question about that. So when we have an ordinance that says that someone may be suspended, then I wonder, where is the teeth in that ordinance? And is there guidelines then on when someone should or shouldn't be? I'm wondering why the term may is used there and what the implications of that are. And then because it says unless the language is expressly in conflict with the terms of the collective bargaining agreements, I would love a document then that cross-references to our current collective bargaining agreements and says which ones then it would not apply to. Which ones is it in conflict with? Is it in conflict with the patrolmen's union but not with another, right? Like, I would love to have that information just so I can understand the impact that this would have, or the impact that it wouldn't be able to have.
Right, so may essentially leaves it up to the discretion of the appointing authority, to determine whether or not it is egregious enough for suspension. Certain collective bargaining agreements provide what can be a suspendable offense and what's not. I know we have done the analysis, so I think Kelly Curran from Personnel will probably have that document, and I can ask her to provide that if she has not already. And within that document, there is it highlights essentially each bargaining unit and what is the teeth really in that document. So I think that'll be helpful to you, Councilor McGrath.
Thank you.
Councilor Vigan.
Thank you. I would just like to note that we'll mark this as a draft so we know it's not final. And from the maker, this we received after 3 o'clock today, but I was able to speak with the maker briefly, so I'm not sure I've captured all of the concepts, but I'll do my best on the fly. So the idea here, this language speaks specifically to somebody who's indicted by a grand jury, and our discussion was more general than that and included categories of being charged with a crime or misconduct in office. And I'd like to see that language incorporated into a new draft per the maker, and I agree. And the other point is that, to an earlier point made, that the employee may be suspended in this context of being charged with a crime or misconduct or misconduct. So the idea would be that we would have some language that should the appointing authority make that determination that the employee will be suspended, that in this context, that suspension shall be without pay. And I think that was more the flavor of the intent of the order as I understand it. And certainly we'll have a chance to look at another draft and can have more discussion when hopefully the maker can be here also. But those would be a couple of points I would want in. And I do think it's important, as stated earlier, what would conflict and what wouldn't. We've had over the years varying opinions about whether a contract prevails over the law or whether the law prevails over an ordinance. And it's gone back and forth many times over a number of years. So it would be helpful to try to clarify an understanding in that regard. But I think this is good progress in getting us there, and I think these main concerns are arising out of situations where employees have been charged or put on suspension due to charges of either crimes and or misconduct, and they've received full pay. And then we have later found out that there was misconduct or there was illegal activity, and then it's too late and the city can't recover anything. And while I do agree that it would be a harm to somebody if they were to lose pay and later to be found not guilty and have to be compensated. We could perhaps put some more language in there that would be a little bit stronger around a restitution thing, because certainly we're not looking to be charging people without a serious cause. Let me put it that way. I don't think we're trying to open the door in that regard, but on the other hand, we are trying to protect the city when we, down the road, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, are then faced with certain allegations of liability. Thank you.
Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, I just have, I don't have a problem with any of this. I would only just say, as a way to protect people, I said this is the last meeting. If we're gonna do this, I punish somebody that's indicted and not, that's as preliminary as it gets. And I think we should have language in there that says something to the effect that their salary shall be held in escrow in an interest-bearing account, whatever that is. So if we're gonna do this, and then we get to the, no, I hear what Kevin's saying, and I hear what's being written here, but it's all punitive. So in terms of this process, I think we should, if they come out not guilty or no findings, they should get their compensation, and they should get whatever interest is in there. So, and that to me is kind of important. Otherwise, I don't see me supporting it. And then I was going to add one other thing onto that, and I just slipped my pea brain here, but it'll come to me in a second, Mr. Chair. So I'll stop here, and when it comes back, I'll just raise my hand.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I just wanted to chime in, if I may, Councilor Rivera.
Yep,
When I spoke when Kelly and I spoke with Councilor Jourdain on Monday, it was made pretty clear that this would be related to indictable offenses only. So I think, I would like to have him be part of this conversation so we can make sure that we are doing what he intended, and then as amended throughout your guys' discussion and then the full council's discussion. But I would like to make sure that we're all on the same page about what is going on. And I did advise him that this would be on Monday. I told him it would probably be a later file, and he was okay with that. So hopefully he'll be able to speak to this maybe next time, but I'm happy to put in any sort of amendments that the committee wants to have in it before the next council meeting or the next ordinance committee meeting.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, it came to me. So I think because this is a little bit loose, that I think we should have, so one, I really want to see this thing amended to have any funds due the employee who's now been suspended to be held in escrow, and to be held in escrow in an interest-bearing account controlled by the city. So I think that's kind of important. The other part is, if we're going to leave it to discretion of a department head, I think we need to lay that out, and I think we should say something to the effect that the department head shall develop procedures relative thereto. I mean, because you can't just go in as a get indicted. I mean, it's a very serious thing to be indicted. We all know that, but we also know that sometimes prosecutors are overly aggressive, and next thing you know, they're indicted and they're out of pay for 3 years, and it's pretty tough. So, I'd like to have whoever the department is, they're in a position of authority. They really should come up with some kind of a procedure, and working with the law department to ascertain whether or not they're going to actually invoke this. Thank you.
Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. So through the chair to Attorney Mantaleski, I just have a clarifying question relative to charged with a crime or misconduct. So is it true that some misconduct is a crime and other misconduct would not be a crime? Is that the distinction that you're making?
The distinction I'm making is that so this would apply to misconduct while in office or employ, right? And the distinction is indictable versus not indictable. There's certain crimes that are indictable, or felonies and misdemeanors. I think all felonies are indictable, but I'd have to make sure. I'm not a criminal attorney, so I shouldn't really speak to that. But like certain misdemeanors are not indictable. So indictable just means that a grand jury has convened, they found probable cause to charge this person with this crime. So there are some crimes that are indictable and some that are not.
Okay, thank you. So I guess if you're giving us back a revised draft, you could describe the misconduct as an indictable level of misconduct.
So
Whether
I
they
do have that
are or
in there, and I'm
aren't
sorry I'm moving
indicted?
because my dog just got crazy. But I do have that in there that it has to be an indictable issue, but I can add in any sort of other language you think would help be clarifying for that.
Well, just as I'm understanding it secondhand, the idea that that the person would have to be indicted by a grand jury seemed to be a very high bar, and it seems that people have been suspended without that happening. And so this is aimed at getting those who are suspended for crimes if they're suspended for a crime, then would not receive pay. I believe that's the gist of it. So, thank you. So whatever words works for that. Thank you.
Jeff, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just wanted to let the committee know that if there were any motions to amend the language for any of the legal forms in real time, I can screen share and input those as you see fit.
All right, thank you. Meg?
Well, I have two questions. The first is through the chair to Councilor Bacon. So, just am I hearing correctly that the issue is just the current language says that it says is indicted, which means it's already gone through the process of
By a grand jury, right?
Yes, versus someone may be suspended currently on paid administrative leave, pending that, going through that process towards indictment. And what we want is to be able to potentially put them on unpaid administrative leave before they've been indicted.
Correct. So I'm outside of my wheelhouse here. So my understanding is that somebody could be charged through a grand jury. They could be charged by the district attorney. They could be charged in more than one way. And so my understanding was that the desire was to have it broader than only stating indicted by a grand jury. So I don't know the right words to put, so I wouldn't want to amend these words.
Okay.
But I would like to send it back to the law department to make it broader than indicted by a grand jury.
Yes, and I see your hand, Councilor Rantelewski, and then from me to you, Councilor Bacon, real quick, just to think. Only because like the goal I think is, at least to my understanding, was to like if someone is battling in court, we don't pay them until they figure out what's going on in court, right? If they're found guilty, then we don't pay them anything. If they're found not guilty, then we reimburse them. Hopefully it's incentivized with some sort of investment and then escrow, which would be great. But I think that the moment we go past that, now we're going into different like procedures and policies that go through HR. And what I mean by that is if someone does something that commits a crime, right, but is not at the level of being indicted, there is more than likely, I'm assuming there is a process that they have to go through with HR just for that alone, that there is a decision being made and things are being made on that level. So it's like, do we want what we're saying, the law, the ordinance, to go deeper than what we're at and go into HR?
So all I'm saying is that when the appointing authority makes the decision to suspend
Right.
in this context, not backing before that. I mean, whatever steps they take, I'm imagining there's many steps that they take before they make a determination to suspend somebody for misconduct or criminal.
Right, but I think that misconduct and a criminal charge is two different things. It could be misconduct.
might be.
That I'm insubordinating. You know what I mean?
So
And-
why don't we say criminal misconduct?
right. So that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah,
if we're
which is-
going deeper into it, then
No. So I'm hoping the law department would just come back to us and say criminal misconduct is differentiating it from
just
you violated a rule.
our policies and stuff.
Yeah.
Jane?
Yeah.
Thank you. I do appreciate that last comment, because that's why it's important to have the word an indictable misconduct. That means it's not just a violation of a rule, an internal rule or anything like that. That means it's actually gone through that criminal process of indictment. So I just wanted to make that one thing clear. And then the second thing, when we did speak with Councilor Jourdain, it was very specific that, and he said very specifically, it was not with respect, did not intend it to be anything, to apply to anything in an investigatory phase,
Right.
only after that person has actually been charged.
I have one last question.
Counselor McGrath-Smith.
So I believe that I was listening to Councilor Bartley talk about the department head playing a role, and I heard Solicitor Mentalewski use the term appointing power. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to name specifically that it's the appointing power. You know, is it directly the city council or is it the mayor? Is it, right, who does it come down to, and being really specific about that? And then are we referring to an HR policy that's somewhere on paper that actually names on what basis an appointing power suspends someone, or are we codifying that into ordinance?
Jane?
Thank you. So I did make reference in the statute because the language is the appointing authority, not a department head, under the statute. So I did reference back to the statute when it speaks about how essentially codifying this statute into our own ordinances is how I understood it. So I did make reference back to that statute, Mass General Laws 268A section 25. So I think that it is going to be very subjective as to each appointing authority. So it could be the mayor, it could be the city council. This could be an elected position as well. It could be a variety of different situations. So I think a reference back to the statute is
So
probably
real
the
quick,
safest bet here.
not to cut you off, but for the elected piece, and this is interesting to me, so then who would be the appointing authority there to suspend?
Sorry, I was just getting to the statute. So
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted to make sure the language was there. So it says,
The body itself?
in an elective or appointed public office, that's a great question. I honestly,
I think Attorney
I
Bissonnette
don't
might
have that
an
answer at this moment. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that for you, Councilor Rivera.
Counselor Rivera.
I think Attorney Bissonnette has an answer, though.
Oh, perfect, great.
It dawns on me that question was answered in Chicopee, based on the similarities in our charters. After an indictment of a city official, it was found that elected city official, there was no legal way to remove him from office until his term expired. So he served out his term till the very end. And that's generally true unless you get a conviction. As you know, conviction of a felony would then remove someone from office. But other than that, while they're only under indictment, it can't be done, at least for electeds.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then Counselor
I'm all set.
Vigan, you're all set.
I'm all set.
So,
And I'll just add one other piece, if I may. So we can always define it in our ordinance, right? Who is the appointing authority? So for elected officials, it looks like they're out of luck until the voters vote again. But in terms of the employees of the various departments, the appointing authority should be, for example, the fire commission, right? That would be the appointing authority, so that's pretty easy. And the rest of them, for the most part, would be the mayor, I would think.
Bottom line.
So that's how I look at it.
all right. So
It should be defined.
motion to table to a following.
I'll make a
meeting.
motion to table for the law department to amend the 3 areas that we addressed to clarify the language for discussion at our next ordinance committee meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And motion to take up number 3, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3 was filed by Counselor Bacon. Order that an ordinance be created that establishes a public process for approving the installation of raised crosswalks that includes input from safety department and the public and a determination from engineering. Counselor Bacon,
Thank
want to
you.
expand on this?
So we do have the legal form on this, and it looked to me like basically the law department took our speed hump ordinance and added to it crosswalks, which to me makes total sense because they're functionally the same. And as I've learned, with the installation of some speed humps, apparently the state regs are also the same. So it seemed that it was important to make sure we go through all the steps because unfortunately we're in the situation of having to have 2 of them removed on Homestead Avenue. And so my goal in filing this was to make sure that when they do get approved for installation, they do meet the criteria that are required. So that was the impetus for me to file this order, not to make more rules, but more to save money and not pay for projects and then have to pay to revise them.
Can you
Counselor Bartley?
just expand on that, the homestead situation?
So back when we had received some monies, and I can't cite to exactly what they are, there was a circumstance where the engineer was coordinating with another department, and we at the time were asked for sites of concern as city councilors. And at the time, I sent in certain streets with an email that said, I'm not sure if these qualify, because I knew about the 30-mile-an-hour rule relative to speed humps, and I didn't know if there was that rule relative to raised crosswalks or not. So those of us forwarded areas of concern to the mayor at the time, who then, I guess, it went through engineering and planning. I'm not sure which other department it went through, but there was no process for them, and this, I believe, was the first time we were ever using them in the city, the first one being Main Street, which actually, I think they ended up using speed humps down there, but I'm not sure. But it was back then when there was all that discussion, and it just went through a less formal process. And so some of the considerations weren't addressed. So then, fast forward, the crosswalks got installed, and then the feedback started coming back from people that were surprised and kind of flying over them. And so that feedback came from more than one area. And then the interim engineer who had picked the whole thing up in the middle after it had already been through steps 1 through, say, 3 out of 5, didn't go back and re-verify everything. But then when the feedback started coming in, she reviewed the criteria and made that determination relative to the 2 on Homestead, which I did put out in my update out in Ward 5, because I've got half the people that are happy they're there, and I've got half the people that are unhappy they're there as these things go. So I just let people know that that engineering review, even though she came in late, is what indicated that. So then, to go forward a little further, they went out to the installer to try to get it uninstalled, and there we sit because we got all jammed up with the paving contracts needing to be renewed, and then the season running out, and so right now, that's tied up in the bids for the streets with the Chapter 90. So there you have it, that's the backstory, and why I thought it would be good for the people in the neighborhood to know if it might be coming, that it would be coming, and also for our public safety officials who are affected, because we have a fire station right there too, would also be aware before something like that happened. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, so, in reading the language, I think, for me, there's a place where it says, no speed hump or race car shall be installed or established except petition the city council signed by at least 2/3 of property owners or 2/3 of registered voters within the impacted segment of a proposed speed hump, street or raised crosswalk. So I kind of have a little bit of an issue of the piece where it's like the registered voters piece, because there are a lot of residents that are not actual registered voters, and because they're not registered, technically they don't have a say-so on what goes on their street. So for me, it's like, if we could make an amendment to say residents that live on the street, it would make more sense. And then continue on where it says reports upon petition of property owners. I think changing it to property owners and residents that live within the affected area, just so that we're reminding that we're, like, people that live in the area or residents that live in the area also have somewhat of a say-so in how the area is impacted by the crosswalks or the speed humps.
So if I can?
Yep.
So originally, these petitions required it to be the property owners, and then we expanded it to have it be residents in a form, but sort of the only way we know if somebody resides somewhere is either if they fill out the census or if they register to vote, because otherwise we don't have any way of knowing who lives where. So it would be hard for the clerk to be certifying, because she has to certify the signatures on these petitions. So I just don't know logistically how she would be able to do that if we don't have some list by which she can check things off. I just don't know how she would know that, to get to the 2/3. But we did want to make sure residents could weigh in.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the whole idea. But she still has to say you got 2/3, and she has to have a way of being able to know that.
It's just that I know, like, in wards 1 and 2, there's a lot of could be voters, right? But not everyone is registered, and they express different opinions throughout the community, and it would make it difficult for them to be heard with regards to that. But I understand the complexity behind it. Yeah. All right.
I think in most, I can't speak to that with certainty, but the idea here was that more people could be represented than had been in the past.
Yes. No, I totally get that, because before it was property owners and 2/3. But then I think of, like, we have a whole 3-4 shelters in certain areas, and the people in the shelters, then in a sense, if they're not considered residents if they're not registered voters in the community too as well. But I guess if that's where we're at, and that's logistically the easiest way to kind of like check like dot the I's and cross the T's.
And for the moment, I think it's,
It makes sense for now, then I guess.
all right. Then I'd offer a motion that we accept the legal form and recommend it to the city council at the next meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye. Motion to take up item 4.
so moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4 was filed by Councilor Bacon. Order that the Holyoke double the tax abatement for veterans as authorized by the HERO Act, expanding federal property tax exemptions. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. I filed this at the request of a constituent, maybe more than one. And as the state law was amended, we've received legal form from the law department echoing the new state law language so that we could adopt it. And I'd like to make a motion that we accept the legal form and recommend it to the city council at the next meeting.
Here a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's pretty straightforward.
Perfect. Motion to
Take
take
up number 5, please.
Here a
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 5 was filed by Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti. Order that the city create the position of municipal hearings officer to hear appeals by offenders of the state building code made pursuant MGLC 148A, Section 2, and that a stipend be determined for the said position. I don't see Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti present at the moment, but we do not have language here either as well. So, Councilor Jane, I mean, not Councilor, Council Jane Monteleschi.
I'm technically a counselor too, right?
Right.
But just
Spelled
not for the
differently.
city council. So, this was actually an issue that the law department raised. We learned that, well, first of all, there had been several municipal fines that had been issued with respect to buildings. I'm sure you may have seen it in the news releases from the mayor or otherwise on various news reporting outlets. And there was a question of how do these get appealed outside of a court process? And we do not have a municipal hearings officer. We did previously have a municipal hearings officer some time ago, but we do not at this point. And under the statutes, I think it's 148A and 40A Section U, I believe, was related to municipal fines. The first one has to building fines, and the second one, municipal fines in general. They do talk about a process for appealing certain municipal fines through a municipal hearing officer. So I think it is, the law department would most certainly like to see a municipal hearings officer appointed to hear these appeals of certain municipal fines that are issued and tickets, so that we can save time and expense of having to enforce these through court. So I think that is pretty much the intent of the order, and I'm happy to get some legal language to the committee if they would like, and after discussion by you all with respect to that potential position.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley and then Councilor.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with this, so to me, it's, the municipal hearing officer is defined in Section 1, says a person appointed by the appointing authority of a municipality to conduct requested hearings of code violations pursuant to this chapter. So it's just a question of, first, let me just see what this says here in the order. Create position to hear appeals by offenders of the state building code made pursuant to, and that a stipend. Okay, well, first off, this order is a lot broader than what the definition is. So we're under no obligation to provide a stipend, as far as I can tell. And then, in that regard, but then it says offenders of the state building code. Well, I don't know exactly, it looks like there's a few things that can happen under this 148A. So you have to be a little bit careful on that. And then the third part is, who's the appointing authority? And now, so we're gonna have to go back to that again. So, I mean, I'm of the opinion that the city council needs to have a voice in all this stuff. I know there's other councilors that don't just want to give any authority we have to the mayor and just be done with it. So you've got to, you got to think that out. But if the law department wants to come back with some legal language on this, I would happily entertain it, and I'll make the motion for having them do that at the appropriate time. Okay.
Counselor Bacon?
So I have one main question, and that is, does the municipal hearings officer have to be an attorney?
No, it's not no.
No?
That's accurate. No, they don't need to be an
No,
attorney.
doesn't say it in there. The
No?
answer's no.
So I guess I would have to be convinced why we would add another position, especially if we're going to add any money in the budget, since we are already very strapped in our budget and we have taxed to the max. Thank you.
Counselor McGrath-Smith?
Has a number for the stipend been named? Are we talking $1,000? Talking $5? I'm imagining this is because, is it a Board of Health? A person that we're imagining? Who are we imagining would be this?
I have no idea.
Local code enforcement officer. And what kind of stipend are we imagining? Because I can understand the value, especially in what has happened with recent changes to building code. We suddenly had a lot of land, multifamily owners that were sort of surprised, shocked by the new regulations that came in. And I think, if I'm guessing by context here, one of the pieces for why we're seeing this now is because we want to have somebody who is empowered to be a local code enforcement officer so that they can then try to move it forward without it just having to go directly to the courts. So I don't know if, I think Solicitor Mentalowski wants to.
Jane and then Counselor Bartley.
Thank you. So we do have a code enforcement officer. His name's Davin Pasek. He does our zoning code. The Board of Health usually hears appeals of state sanitary code notice violations. So really, this would be, I think, related to building department fines pretty specifically. The stipends that I usually see when I was kind of looking at this was, anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000. I think the average being like 1,200 for the position. And so it's not necessarily that we need someone to enforce, because we do already have notices of violation that go out. We have an enforcement ability. This is just, people who get these notices do have a right to appeal. And there's two ways to do that. You can either go through a municipal hearings officer, or you can go to the court. So the intent is really to have it more in-house, to handle the municipal appeal, at least at a first level, within the city. And then if the applicant is, so the appellant is successful and they end up winning, then the city can either appeal to the court or they can. So I think we're trying to make the process for how people can appeal a little bit more, honestly, easy and more property owner, business owner friendly, to give them an in-house really ability to do the appeal.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, thank you. So, the section 5, Mr. Chair, in 148A, it says, the stipend for municipal hearing officers, which shall be not less than $2,500 a year. So at least we have an answer for that now. But I think, just to the prior speaker's point, I think that if we're, the maker of the order, and I think through the law department, needs to justify to us, where's the benefit for the city of Holyoke? Are we saying that by having a hearing officer and paying this person, we're gonna save court time? Well, you better justify it. I mean, you can't just come up with an order like this and just say, here, just set up the position. So I think this is a work in progress, but like I said, if the law department justifies it and they put explain how they want to have the person appointed and who should be appointed and whether or not it has to be an attorney, then I'm willing to entertain it.
Thank you, Counselor Bacon.
So through the chair to Attorney Mantaleski, where would the law department see this person sitting as a practical matter?
You mean where would they hold their hearings?
Right.
I think that's pretty much up to space, maybe the 4th floor conference room of the annex.
Well, let me rephrase it then. What department would the person receiving this stipend be a part of?
Probably building.
So they'd be appealing to the same department that's issuing the fine?
Usually that's how it does happen, yes.
Okay.
Counselor McGrath-Smith?
I had the same question, and if it makes sense to actually be someone who is a city employee or expressly not, or if there's another mechanism, or if we need to create more separation, because I do think that so I guess this brings up another question. If we create this position, does that mean that people are required to go through that person versus go to housing court? Because it looks, based on the statute as I'm reading it, that it's one or the other. They can pick if they opt into this appeal process or the courts. And I can see a person thinking, well, pros and cons. Maybe it's faster. I don't have to file paperwork. I don't have to figure out how to get myself a lawyer or legal advocate. This will save me money. So I'm going to go through the appeals process. Maybe that's the pros and cons of it. Because I don't think we can force them to. They could still say, well, I don't know if I'm going to get a fair appeal because it's within the same department. So I'm going to go the route of still going to housing court, in which case it still won't save us any time if the goal is to cut down on the amount of support that we're giving to folks as they're going through the housing court process. So I'm just wondering about that, and it doesn't sound like we can make them. So effectively, we would want to really incentivize them. If the goal is to save court time, we'd want to really incentivize them to follow this alternative process than to take that other option.
And real quick, Councilor McGrath-Smith, to play devil's advocate, though.
I'm sorry, I can't.
My bad. I have a deep voice and sometimes project as well. To play devil's advocate, I think that there's also the opposite to be said, right? If you do select to go to court, and the court tells you have to pay the fines, you're going to pay the fines. Versus if you go to the appeals and you work with the appeal officer and the appeal officer waives all your fines because you got up to code all of a sudden, you got that through that appeals officer. Whereas if you'd have gone to court and then the court tells you now you got to pay the fines, you're going to have to pay all those fines. And there is no flexibility around that. It's a catch-22, but I'm kind of on the same page, for me at least personally, where Councilor Bartley kind of is, where it's like having the conversation, continuing the conversation, trying to navigate the process to see what makes sense, so that way we can try to move forward with this, and then also allowing for the maker of the order to come in, expand a little more on it, and as well as the law department to expand where, because I kind of agree with it, and I think it makes sense because it will create more effective and efficiency throughout the department, but it's where does it create effectiveness and efficiency, and how is it creating that effective and efficiency? So I'm cool with creating language and tabling it for now, but Councilor Bacon, go ahead.
I was just going to offer a motion to table to obtain more information and for the maker to be here.
Yeah, well, okay, we're just on discussion. I would just amend that motion, just say that we send it to the law department, get some legal language back to us, okay? So I don't necessarily need to have the maker here, but we need something from the law department. So
There is a second on the amendment.
if let's just offer a friendly amendment to that amendment, and that's all we need. Thank you.
You're here, second on the friendly amendment. All in favor?
All right,
Anyone opposed?
all right, you want to take 6, sir?
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6 was filed by Councilor McGee, former council, to explore creating a zoning and court enforcement position in the building departments. What I have here. I feel like we've kind of, we already have that. So Jane, your hand is up.
Yes, we do. We do have a zoning code enforcement officer. Again, his name's Davin Kasich, and he's doing a great job. So we do have that position. It looks like it's been created and filled. So
Thank you.
Motion's been complied with.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome.
And good job, Councilor McGee. And then I'll make a motion to take number 7 off the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Order that our ordinance that requires sinks in certain establishments such as tattoo parlors, etc., be connected to water, be modified to allow for portable sinks as an option. Councilor Bacon.
Thanks. So I filed this a long time ago at the request of a constituent who was having some issues with the space that he was leasing. And that was the basis for me filing it. And the goal in me filing it was that the health concerns would be met where there seemed to be some access to water issue. And then, so that was that. And I don't know if the circumstance still exists or if it's been otherwise resolved, but that was the basis for filing it when I did.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, when the time is right, I'll make a motion to refer this to the Board of Health for their input, because I think we need to hear from them. I don't think this is a bad order, frankly. And I'll tell you, I just came out of some other hearings from other city agencies, and I better just watch what I say. Give me a second. Put it this way. Some city boards are really going way beyond their purview, and they're invoking the jurisdiction of other city boards. I know this sounds a little cryptic, but it's impacting local businesses and not in a helpful way. So I have no problem at all just making a motion to refer this to Board of Health for their input.
And I'll second that.
And tabling it for now.
I'll second that.
But it's a good order, I think.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion to take number 8 off the table, please.
Second.
All in favor? There you go. Item 8 was filed by Councilor Jordan. Order that the City Council review and adopt mayor's proposal for the City Council financial policies by ordinance. This was tabled a couple times. I think that we have legal language today. But and I think, Jane, if you're still here, I don't see you. Anyways, correct me if I'm wrong. Jeff, then, that they were saying something about, is this the one where kind of fixing some of the language around the CAFO stuff too there, or attaching another document to it, I believe. Where are we at? Oh, Attorney Bessonette, you're going to speak to this one?
Sure.
All right.
Where we're at is making this Appendix 3 to the ordinances, similar to how we have zoning set up, and then determining what y'all want to do with the CAFO position. One of the clarifications we needed was whether CAFO/mayor was still going to be the language if the CAFO is approved. and whether we wanted it to be both, either or just eliminate CAFO entirely. So I think Councilor Bacon had brought that point up before, and I also know that you have CAFO on the agenda for this evening. You don't usually echo another member of your council, but I've heard Councilor Jourdain say too often that there's a lot of moving pieces and different jigsaw parts of this puzzle. So I might suggest that to get a committee of the whole together to decide how you want to integrate these things. And now that we're going to be moving towards February for a special election, January 28th for a special election, it may make sense to spend some time in a working group to sort of consolidate all these thoughts and then have a series of actions ready to go in January. That way, if there is in fact a positive vote from the plebiscite to change elected treasurer to appointed treasurer, the city would be prepared to have in place all of these different moving parts ready to go for the next budget cycle on July 1st. So that would be my thought. And at this point, you could adopt this as Appendix 3. And if you later wanted to revisit it when you're doing the incorporating all the different aspects, including the line control and departmental integrations, that might be a good time to review this and see. It's been suggested that it could be integrated into a new ordinance for the finance department if you decide to go that route as well. This could be integrated into that as part of the ordinances rather than a standalone, but that's really more of a stylistic choice, I guess, editorial choice that you can make.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Reagan?
Thank you. So I've reviewed the legal form, and in my opinion, Section 3 should be eliminated because I do not believe the financial policies should depend upon a position being created, because policies talk about how things will operate, not about the structure, as we already had recommended that we would say mayor/CAFO, depending upon what happens with the other further reorg of our city, which so far nothing has happened. So from my perspective, and I've said this for months, I'm in favor of supporting the financial policies, but not hooking them to the creation of an additional position. And I still think the policies are good. I do think there should be an administrative step. I mean, these are some 150 pages long. My concern about those financial policies is that A, who has read them, B, who in the city will have read them and be complying with such a deep and long ordinance. I mean, we have a book of ordinances, and I don't think most of us know what half of them are, actually. So I do think having good policy is a good thing, but there has to be some mechanism whereby people at least have reviewed it and certified that they understand it, have read it, and will comply with it, or we're just adding more pages in another book, and they won't amount to anything. But I really object to Section 3 of the legal form. I don't think it's needed, and I think the language that we asked legal to do, just say CAFO/mayor, leaves it open that if we do or if we don't, we still have our head person, who is our head finance person, which is our mayor, in charge of these policies and making sure they're complied with. So even if we left in Section 3 and said, oh yeah, we'll have a CAFO, we still have to have mayor/CAFO, because we won't have a CAFO, in my view. And so I would like the committee to keep the language that we asked legal to put in, and take out Section 3 or table this till we get the language. We really can't pass this because we don't even have the appendix from legal yet. in front of us, so we really have to table it, because we don't have the language in the appendix tonight.
Thank you, Councilor
Thanks.
Bartley.
Yeah, wow. Right, so I would say that, first of all, congratulations to Mike on use of the word plebiscite. That's a great noun. Second off, I think what Mike was saying is Section 3 is kind of, just to put it in there, just for discussion. I don't support Section 3 at all, and I don't think it should be there, but I think that was Mike, in essence, what he's saying. Just, you can leave it or not, but you should at least discuss it. So, in me, that you shouldn't have a trigger effect in there. I don't think that's good policy. And then third and lastly, to the chair, I would say that it would be very helpful to me if we're going to have this really expansive financial policy manual. I haven't heard from the financial team, at least firsthand, all together at once. Maybe Rory and Tanya, and of course the mayor and whomever else is on this team, tell us their take on this. I mean, I just haven't seen I haven't been part of a meeting like that. Maybe this happened last year in ordinance when I wasn't part of the committee, but this is a kind of a new chapter, and I think it certainly would help me to better learn the manual and better learn their perspective on what they see as good and bad in the manual. So based upon all that, I don't think we're ready to vote on this. So when the time is right, I'll move to table. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for me, on my end, I agree. I'm ready to table as well. I don't think that we're ready to move forward on a lot of parts. I don't know how I feel about the trigger clause, as you call it, Councilor Bartley. I have to kind of look it over it again. But I would say that I think maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, or the mayor and Rory came in and presented on some of this stuff.
You're right. Yeah,
They did.
You're right.
Yeah.
I like to hear from. You're right.
No, and I hear where you're coming from,
I
like
did
having
forget.
Tanya present too as well. I think for me, there's a place where we're gonna need to figure out what's gonna happen with regards to this role and in regards to our finances overall, whether we agree with it or not, because the person that should know all the policies would be the CAFO, because they're getting
Mayor.
paid to do that.
It's the mayor.
The mayor would need to know the charter, the ordinances, then the policies, and everything else on top.
That's the job.
That doesn't make sense, though. That does not make sense for any one person to be able to fathom all that and be able to regurgitate it on a dime. That does not make sense. And that's the reason why I keep reciting effectiveness and efficiency in government. And for us to move forward, whether we agree with it or not, there are going to be certain times where we have to kind of like figure out how we're going to be able to move forward in a way that's effective, consistent, and continues progress, whether we have this mayor, whether we have a different mayor, whether we have whomever. Because I think one of the issues we've had as a community, and the reasons why people don't know the policies, is because we have constant shift and change within our departments, within our local elected officials. Without that, I know you've been here for 10 years.
No, I said we had a mayor for 10 years.
You had a mayor for 10 years. Yeah. It takes more than that, though.
No, it never did.
The proof is in the pudding today. Where we're at today is a reflection of what's gone on over time, right? So like where we're trying to get to for tomorrow is not the same as it is today. And for some of us, we are trying to take different steps to move in a direction so that it looks different for tomorrow. That's the only thing I would say with, like, although I agree there are a lot of questions, a lot of gaps, and there are finances that need to be figured out around this. But I would also say that we could all agree to say that we have to figure out a better way to move forward with regards to how we move with our finances and navigate our finances. But that's all I'll say. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. And what I would say is, over the years, I've seen us build a bigger bureaucracy in the city of Holyoke, and I have not seen the resulting efficiency or effectiveness in the city government. Thank you. I'll make a motion that we table these.
I'll second if everybody's set. Yeah.
We're all set?
Yeah.
All-
I'll withdraw it if more people want to discuss.
No, it's cool. Oh, wait.
So are we tabling for the purpose of wanting to see the appendix fully drafted?
I would say we're tabling for that piece and also to try to get things done at the same time before the January 28th plebiscite. Right?
Plebiscite. And also for Councilor Bartley to hear a little more from the financial team.
Yes, that too.
Maybe I need to get a little more engaged on it than I was last time.
And that too as well. That was seconded already on the motion. I mean, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 8
Motion
was
to take
tied.
up number 9, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 9 was co-filed by Councilor Bartley and Councilor Ocasio. The city determined a more efficient manner to remove handicap disability signs. Perhaps a database should be maintained by the city clerk. City addresses with handicap disability signs in front of a parcel's address should maintain and made public. Further to example, an annual basis, each addressee such a sign should be notified and must affirm whether or not the sign should remain. Councilor Bartley and Councilor Ocasio.
Yeah, so I'll be pretty brief. I've been having a couple emails with Brenna, as I was instructed to do, and I'm at the point now where I'm hopeful we can start to generate some legal language. I'll send what I have to the law department later on. I'll make sure you're on the email. And basically, it's this. Right now, we just want to develop a process to remove the signage instead of having councilors going around and knocking on doors. And that since we have the handicap placard is issued by the city clerk, then we can have a process by which the city clerk, whether it's every 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is, or some period of time, that they need to get an update from the placard holder. I know they're not individual names, but they're usually in a certain area. They need to get regular updates as to whether or not they're still to be used. And so the confirmation period, whatever years or months or weeks we want to put on that, would be a written confirmation. And once you send it out, just like they would email back, and then they would say that they would still want to use the placard. If we don't hear from after 2 or 3 attempts, then the clerk would be the clerk would notify the Public Works Department to say remove the signage. And I think I put in the premise.
Sounds easy.
I put in the premise to this, Mr. Chair, that and I really meant this. It's kind of a good thing because I think we're getting some more apartment dwellers in the middle of the city, and I think parking is going to be a little more of a. And look what Carmen found out. I mean, look at all summer. I mean, and how many people have 1, 2, 3 cars? I mean, it's a lot, and so. And don't forget, the city of Holyoke still always gets the excise tax, so that's, that's still, we want to encourage people to drive vehicles still. I know we want to have alternate modes of transportation, of course, and walking and biking and all that, and we do that. And but I think we're a car-driven society for the foreseeable future, and parking is still going to be at a premium. So, but of course, at the same time, like Carmen says, we still want to have the appropriate parking spaces for those that are less able to navigate the walk. So, at any rate, that was the thinking. I'll just I put my thoughts on an email to Brennan, and we've been talking. And I'll ship them over to the law department. And so I would just say, unless anybody else wants to say anything, fine. But we can probably table this until next time.
Are we
Councilor Bacon.
Are we going to put this in ordinance form and ask legal to draft language, or are we just going to do it as a procedure in the clerk's office?
In ordinance form. That's what That's what
Yeah, I
that's
think,
how I look at
I
it.
think,
So the email that you're sending over is to ask them to put it in legal form?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
yes.
'Cause I-
So will you copy the committee on that?
I sure will.
Great.
I sure will.
And then
Okay, thanks.
one of the comments I guess I had, unless anyone else you have a question, or I think for me it would probably be a little easier. Would it be easier to make it that they would have to re-register and reapply to get another one, like just like you register for your car?
No, because it's a pain for them to have to go through that.
But it's also a pain for us in our department to have to go through sending out the letter. Is going to be more cost for us, and reaching out to them to make sure that they want to still have the.
Right,
the
but
plate.
usually somebody that has a handicap placard, if they don't move, their condition doesn't usually change.
They would still have to register their cars and all that stuff too. That's the only thing. That's the only reason why I say that. Like there are levels of where they would still have to do the same thing
Fair.
anyways
Yeah.
throughout certain things. But I'm not married to that idea either. Yeah, go ahead.
I think your point's an excellent one. I would just say that there's ways to mitigate that. So certainly through the application process, Brenna can, the clerk, I should say, should get all forms of communication between the placard, so maybe an electronic mail.
Email
And
too.
we can put that in our ordinance to say, notice can be given by electronic mail.
Yeah.
Or by postcard. Doesn't have to be a big old fancy letter. You just send out a postcard, which is still, 62 cents or
Like
whatever
your
it is.
dog license, right?
Well,
Kind of thing?
there you go. I mean,
register that.
and really what I put in here was, how often do we want to have the clerk's office send out this thing? I mean, that's the key. You don't want it every 2 weeks, but you don't want it every 10 years either. So you got to come up with a,
That's why I suggested them coming in and re-registering, so that the clerk doesn't have to have that on their plate.
and maybe that's something that they could be proactive about.
Right.
But if they're not proactive about re-registering, then we
Right.
need to, and I hear you on that. So we encourage them to be proactive on re-registering every period of time.
I'd say 2 years.
That makes sense too.
I think 2 years is a nice soft spot, right? If you
Right.
ask me, I think that's a good soft spot. So either if they don't come and re-register, then Brenna has a 6-month window or whatever to go send out some postcards and to remind them. And if we don't hear back,
That's good. So then we'll just wait till we have that legal language and we'll
yeah.
have
So
that.
I'll just put my thoughts together. Yeah.
Perfect. So then,
Motion to
Thanks
table.
for doing that. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to take up number 10, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I'm gonna assume it's all ayes. Item 10 was filed by Councilor McGee. Order that the position of Chief Administrative and Financial Officer be created and added to Schedule A. This has been a very complex position and order to navigate over time, I would say. I am at the will of the body at the moment. I think for me, just having had the other conversation around the CAFO stuff and having had our recent meetings and votes, I'm really at the moment where I'm okay with tabling it and waiting till things further develop, so that we can actually spend more time into getting into this. Because I feel like we've been having conversations and we've been having a variety of different meetings around it, and we're still in the same spot. So where I'm at, for me, is I'm willing to wait until we find out more information, but I'm also at whatever's at the will of the body.
Yeah. If you,
Councilor Bartley.
I'll make that motion if you promise not to put it on an agenda for at least a month or 2.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do.
So moved then.
That's exactly what.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion take number 11 off the table, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 11 was filed by former Councilor Puello, that we consider crafting an ordinance stipulating requirements for expenditure of funds of the police special events line and requirements. Example, committee organized event, private business participating, alcohol served, who is profiting, etc. I took up the order because the order's been here in the jacket. I'm trying to go through the process. If someone would like to continue to proceed and move forward on this order, you may feel free to do so. But otherwise, I would.
I thought
Go ahead.
I thought we got a legal form on it.
We do.
Do we? Okay, perfect.
right here.
There you go. My bad. I am tripping. I am totally. Go ahead, Councilor Bartley.
I haven't read it.
I haven't either, obviously.
I need to, no, that's okay. I mean, listen,
Hey, we got a lot.
I flipped my computer off at 3 o'clock, so I didn't, I just got
No, don't worry.
other stuff today, so. So I'd like to, instead of reading this on the fly, I would prefer that this is not like an emergency deal. I prefer to table this for a month, and then.
Yeah, it would have to be for the next following meeting, not this meeting coming up.
The
the one
one-
after.
Yeah, the next one, yeah, and then, so that'll give me plenty of time to review it and understand it better.
Okay,
So,
right.
and without Will here, I just don't
I
recall.
remember it.
Okay, well then Linda can give us an update as to what was going on. I just don't recall the whole rationale behind it, but I'm sure it was valid, I just don't remember it. So I'll make that motion when everybody else had a chance.
Well, righty then. Anybody else?
So,
Councilor Bacon.
so I did get a chance to look at the legal language, and I would just say that it says, from my understanding of the words, what we were looking for. And that is to assure that when we are providing police details to events, they are either a public event through a public process by the city, or if it's a private event, that the private business, sponsor, person or persons is paying for the detail. That it is not of cost to the taxpayers. That was the main gist. And I believe that's what the legal form says, but I do think everybody on the committee should have a chance to look it over.
Yeah,
and
I think we
you
might
know,
have to look it
and
over because
make sure that
I
that's-
see that, but I also see that supporting private businesses as well in the language, like where it says accountability for responsible fiscal management in relation to events hosted or co-hosted by the city of Holyoke, private businesses and/or organized committees. So it's I'll have to read it more just to make
Right,
sure.
right.
Yeah.
So we just need to look at it, make sure it says what we think it says or what we want it to say, and
My only concern is that like if there is a large event and someone only contracts a certain amount of officers, right? Because that's all they can afford. But the event is that large. Is the city not going to come over and support that particular event? Because let's say it's an event that brings over 5,000 people into a community and they can only afford a certain amount of police officers. Are we
Well,
telling them that they can't do that event?
so, yes. Sometimes you have to say no if they can't ensure safety.
I mean, okay.
Every event has
Councilor
to be
McGrath
safe.
Smith.
Yeah, it was just that you were going the direction that I was going in. That when I remember when this came up, the police chief was asked. This was specific to a few different events that had been paid for out of the special events line item in the police budget, and their response was, this was a call between the police chief and the mayor, that this was an event, looked at what had been approved, didn't seem like this was going to be enough. And so, yes, we stepped in. Yes, we had to pay for that out of a line item. That's why we paid for it out of the special events line item. So I guess it's a question around, is this more of a question for the licensing board around their, when they're permitting the single day events? Are they, do we have the right protocols in place for them to name what police details are required? And where they're funded out of.
I don't know if even those all go through the licensing board.
I thought that's anything requiring a permit for a single day event had to go through licensing board.
Some of it, not all
I
of
don't
it.
think all
But
of them
not all of
even
it?
do.
All of it. Liquor. But if it's sound, you go to
Oh.
the police. If it's blocking the street off, you go to DPW. Like it doesn't.
There's,
Yeah, there's
Many
a lot.
paths.
Exactly.
So I guess again,
so more discussion.
yeah, more discussion. Because again, let's say a private business does it on their private property, cool. But if a private business, since they're gonna block off the street and say that it's free to residents in the community, it
Right.
changes the avenue. Now it's like, it's a
Right.
free event
Now
to
it's
residents.
DPW, but it's going to involve the police department.
Right, so then.
So
that
if they
costs
don't
us.
know, and then they get called at 10 o'clock at night, that's a problem.
But they would know anyways, I would assume.
Well-
Go ahead, Counselor Bartley.
Yeah, so that certainly happens in Ward 3. There's an annual block party. My high school classmate runs it. She charges $25 for everybody, and that provides her with a budget to pay for the detailed officer. So if she accounts for that. I don't think she's had 5,000, but she's probably had 500,
Right,
and she blocks off the street. So
but she gets one detailed officer.
what I don't know, one or two. I don't know what she has, but it's it's costly to have detailed jobs because they get a minimum. They get
At least 4 hours minimum.
4 hours minimum, okay, and they get an hourly rate. So that's one thing. And the other things, very briefly, is that this is very timely, actually, because in finance, 2 weeks ago, we had a kind of a detailed conversation with the acting chief about detail jobs. And then we had a follow-up meeting in the back room with the city council president, myself, and Jeff, and 2 or 3 or 4 members of HPD, and Tanya and Rory. And so there's going to be a lot more follow-up we're expecting in the next weeks, and certainly by the end of this calendar year. That was a deadline we gave them relative to getting our act together in terms of collecting and not having a deficit situation, because this is silly season, how this has been ongoing for basically
10 years.
basically my whole tenure on this board. So it's gotta end, and we've got to figure out a way to collect what's owed. And if these are scofflaws out there, they're no longer welcome to use detail jobs, and if they do again, they got to pay in advance.
I mean, that could be incorporated into this.
That's
If
what
you
I'm-
owe money to the city, you are not eligible
Yeah, that's
to
what I'm
getting
saying.
any
So-
funding from
So,
that stuff.
Mr. Chair, you're right. I'll definitely get this, and you can, or Jeff, you should get this right over to Tanya. I mean, Jeff was in the meeting, and I insisted on him being there just for this reason. So he heard every single word that was said in that meeting, and then and there's going to be some follow-up relative to that. So we could probably table this for
Yep.
more than a minute, and
So are we saying till
well, whatever he wants
November?
to. I don't-
November's fine.
Okay,
November?
Yeah.
sounds good. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Then entertain item, take up item 12
so moved.
Second?
from attorney, all in favor?
Aye.
From Attorney Jane Monteleschi, letter regarding small wireless facilities ordinance.
A motion to receive and that the order and the ordinance was complied with because we already passed the wireless ordinance.
I'll
Perfect.
second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And motion to adjourn, I
And
think, might be.
if there's nothing else that any one of you guys have
Yeah.
on the table, because this thing is long,
Yeah, I don't like doing that.
yeah,
Say
just,
no.
just if there's anything that I feel like you guys feel like you can be complied with or take off,
Oh,
like,
Oh, yeah, can we not?
just let me know if maybe for the next time, if that's okay. I want to leave too. I don't have a problem. I'm not gonna go through every single one, but I just want to make sure that if there's stuff that can be easily handled and dealt with, feel free. I think Jeff has his hand raised. Let me recognize Jeff first, real quick.
Yeah, I'm not sure if any of you caught it late this afternoon, but one additional legal form was sent to me today that I passed along to you for one of the tabled items. It's item 17. I just wanted to make sure you saw it.
17.
Oh, yeah, I saw that language come through. We could take that up in November.
What
In
was
November.
it?
Item 17. It's
What was it?
it's filed by Councilor Puello in accordance with the city charter. Create ordinance language that confirms no sitting city councilor shall be. Yep.
Positions.
No, the sitting on a
Serving
board
on
yeah,
boards.
Councilor Bartley.
I just want to raise a suggestion that if you as a chair would just have an agenda item on here, maybe on a kind of a briefer agenda, where you would say the committee will look over some of the tabled items and make recommendations on what to dispose of and what to not dispose of.
I can do that next meeting.
So that would help me just to sort of trigger my.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
I have
There's a
Jeff
lot
put that.
in there.
I have Jeff put that in the language. I reached out to some other counselors too at the side.
You did ask.
Yeah, just to make sure that some of that is like, so that I can have it on the radar. What's the easy pickings? But I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
You too.
Night, everybody. Thank you.